Good morning, everyone. We're going to get started in about 1 minute.
Hi, Tim Brophy with Will County.
This is Elaine with Troy School District. Lisa Banovich with Joliet Park District. Megan Miller with Joliet Public Library.
I'm Matt Hill with the Forest Reserve District of Will County.
Joe Ball, Roy Township Supervisor.
Jeff Heap with Joliet Junior College. This is Rod Tonelli, serving as the community member.
Probably 20 people on the line. I'm gonna get started.
Okay, welcome. This is Derek Conley with the City of Joliet. This is the Joint Review Board meeting for Tuesday, April 14th, 2020. We typically do these meetings annually and they're held in person, but because of COVID-19, we have elected to make this a conference call. So to start out the meeting, we are just going to do a roll call. So as I call your names, please state that you are present and who you are representing. So first we have Matt Peel.
Yeah, present, Forest Reserve District of Will County.
Jeff Heap.
Present, Joliet Junior College.
Lisa Labovitz.
If it's Banovich, it's present in Joliet Park District.
Joseph Baltz.
Yes, Joseph Baltz is here, Troy Township Supervisor.
Megan Millen.
Here, Joliet Public Library.
Elandis Hampton.
Present, JC 204.
Dr. Todd Cole.
I'm Elaine with Troy School District. Dr. Kale should be joining us shortly.
Dr. Kenneth Lee.
I'm John Troy for Kenny Lee, Minooka Community High School, 111.
Donald Gregory.
I'm present, Will County Public Building Commission.
Timothy Brophy.
Hey, Derek, your audio quality is very poor. If you can get closer to the microphone, that would help. This is Tim Brophy with Will County.
Okay, thank you, Tim. And then also we have Rod Tonelli.
Yep, I'm here, Derek.
Okay, thank you. We're gonna, or I should ask, is there anyone on the line that is a JRB member that I did not call out? Okay, I'll take the silence as a no. So just a few things before we jump to item number 2. This is being broadcasted on JCTV, which can be picked up on the city website under departments, city clerk's office, and then agenda and meetings. You can find the agenda to this meeting as well as a PowerPoint slide that will be used later on during the meeting. The JRB members, as you guys know, have already spoke. You can speak during this meeting. And then one thing I did want to say prior to getting going here is that as we go down, there is an action item on this agenda. However, it is not completely necessary that we exercise an action item today. Many times what happens during these meetings is the JRB members need to go back to their boards and have further discussion on the project, and then we can set up a second meeting in the future, or the JRB member can write a letter to the City of Joliet. That was one of the questions that came up frequently before the meeting started. So, jumping to item number 2, which is selection of temporary chairman of the Joint Review Board. This is something that always has to happen, a little bit of a process here, 2, 3, and 4. So typically what we do is we have someone make a motion to select a temporary chairman of the Joint Review Board, and that is usually our Community Development Director, Kendall Jackson. So if someone can make a motion to temporarily make him the chairman of the Joint Review Board, we can kind of kick the next part of this process off.
This is Tim Brophy, I so move.
Todd Gale, second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 All those opposed? Okay, hearing none, I'm going to turn it over to our temporary chairman, Kendall Jackson, who is our Community Development Director.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. Our next item on the agenda is number 4, and that would be the selection of the permanent chairman of the of the Joint Review Board. Again, this is a formality at this point. We will entertain a motion to appoint the permanent chair of the JRB, as well as a second.
Kendall, I think we need to do the public member.
Oh, I'm sorry. Number 3, I'm sorry, public member. This would be the vote.
I nominate Rod Tonelli as a permanent public member.
Is there a second?
Tim Brophy.
Joe
Todd Gale,
Ball.
I'll second it.
I'm sorry, who was the second?
Joe Ball, representative.
Thank you. All signify by saying aye.
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 Hearing no opposed, that motion carries. We will now move on to item number 4, and that is the selection of the permanent chair of the JRB. And we will entertain a motion for the permanent chair.
Kendall, it might help if we had a roster of all those attending. I remember a couple of names, but I don't have the entire roster in front of me.
Typically what happens is we've already made Kendall Jackson the temporary chair, and someone can now make a motion to make him the permanent chair.
Rod, that motion. And I'll second the motion for Kendall to remain as permanent chair.
Okay, all signify by saying aye.
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 That motion carries. We will now move on to item number 5, and that is public comment. I believe we have two for public comment, and we will queue them up shortly.
Amy Marshall, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Okay, go ahead, Amy.
Hi. Let me just start by saying it's irresponsible to remove vital working farmland. We are seeing a shift in our country as the pandemic is happening. We are bringing manufacturing back to the U.S. In fact, the last few weeks, the amount of foreign shipments is down so significantly that it's been publicized on the news. This opened America's eyes to see what we need to keep here. local manufacturing of goods and farmland. Our farmers are what has kept our food on the shelves these past months, and more than ever, we need to see how important our farms are. The last thing we need is a concrete monstrosity that will ruin working farmland and will put a shift in, will most likely sit empty, since goods from China will be non-existent. This is why I'm assuming that North Point needs to move quickly on an approval so investors can't pull out in the wake of the shift. So this is very wrong on so many levels. So many groups, schools, religious groups, neighborhood associations, warehouse workers, and citizens have told you that they don't want this. You think that the $2 million they are throwing at you put a Band-Aid on a financial situation that it won't stop the hemorrhaging.
Thank you.
Can you still hear me?
Oh, yes. Were you done with your
Hello?
comments? Hello?
Oh, sorry, I just heard something. So that doesn't include the rest of the expenses in January for other dollars on salaries and general expenses. Even the $6 billion won't help out, and you won't see that until the build-out is complete. You should all be ashamed of going against
Can I interrupt you?
constituents.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
If I could interrupt you. Are you
Rick, I'm
are
sorry.
you sure you're
Sorry,
on the right
Rick.
call? Do you want to be talking to the city council of Joliet?
Is this for North Point?
No, this is not for North Point. This is a different matter, and they're going to reconvene at 3 o'clock for the city of Joliet.
Okay, so
Check their website
how do I?
check their website for the information about how to connect to the meeting at 3 o'clock.
Amy, this is Derek Conley with the City of Joliet. I have your phone number, and I can give you a call
Okay,
after this meeting and let you know the process for that. Sorry about that.
Okay, I appreciate that. Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, we've got a second caller.
Brandon Harris, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. I just wanted to give you guys a comment. I think the Rock Run Crossing development is going to be a great idea for Joliet, and I urge you guys to move forward on this as quickly as possible. I think that any new development, in light of a lot of the things we're seeing in the economic dip we're going to see, would be useful for our city, and just wanted to thank you guys for working forward on this project.
Thank you. Okay, the next item on the
Thank you guys.
agenda.
Have an awesome day.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is number 6, and that is discussion of the documentation relative to the proposals for the Rock Run Crossings redevelopment project area and the TIF district. We do have Rick Joseph, who is the attorney for Cullinan, that we will bring on the line now. Mr. Joseph?
Yes, Chairman Axon, thank you. I take it everyone can hear me. I at least hope that's the case.
Yes, loud and clear.
Okay, perfect. First of all, I have not seen that this was broadcast on Joliet cable TV. I've got it up on the monitor, but it's not being broadcast, so I don't know if it's just my inability to connect or whether other people have that same issue. So first I want to make sure that all of the Joint Review Board members have the slides that we presented so that we could facilitate this discussion. Does anybody not have those slides? Okay, thank you. Then with that, please allow me to start. Good afternoon. First of all, I hope and trust that all the members of the Joint Review Board and everyone listening in and all your families are healthy today. My name is Rick Joseph. Also on the phone with me, albeit separately because we're monitoring, or excuse me, social distancing, is Scott Brunton. We are attorneys with the law firm of Miller, Hull & Triggs, and we represent Cullinan Companies, who are the developer of the Rock Run crossings. We're also acting as the TIF consultants in connection with this very worthwhile project. Each of you should have received a copy of the TIF redevelopment plan, which will be referred to within the points of the presentation. And also, we're joined telephonically by members of Cullinan Companies who are listening in, so that if there are questions that are best responded to by the developer as opposed to the developer's counsel, they are available for your questions today. First of all, I'm sorry that we're not able to do this in person. Voice meetings are difficult. We very much appreciate the fact that it robs all of us of the opportunity to interact with the presenters, and we're going to do our best to explain to you not only the legal aspects of this project, but the benefits of the project and why this project is such a benefit to the city of Joliet and the entire community. So while normally I would welcome anyone raising their hand and interrupting me for questions at any point in time throughout the presentation, that's going to be very difficult. So with your permission, I'd like just to have all of your questions at the end. We've left some time for responses for questions, and we'd be happy to answer them then. So with that, let me direct your attention to slide 2 of the presentation. And slide 2 simply just is a statement. Actually, it's a question. Why now? There are likely 2 fundamental questions that each of you are asking on behalf of your taxing districts. And that is, 1, why would Cullinan be approaching all the taxing bodies in regards to creation of a TIF district in this uncertain time? And second, why should the city and the community approve a TIF district in these uncertain times? Well, indulge me for just a moment, please, because I want to tell you a little bit about myself before I tell you the responses to those 2 questions. I'm a lawyer. My practice is roughly 50% commercial real estate development and 50% public law. My firm represents over 15 municipalities, over 100 school districts, 4 park districts, the Peoria Airport Authority, and Illinois Central College, a contemporary of your excellent junior college. As such, we understand perhaps more so than any other lawyers who represent commercial real estate developers what TIF does, what the impact is, and what the benefit is, and we understand how it affects all of the taxing bodies, especially during this pandemic time where you're all concerned about your budget. And so with all of that in the background, we are here today asking you to approve a tax increment financing district. And the question that you're asking yourself is why? Well, there's a couple related aspects to that. First of all, is we must all look to the future. If everything stops, then this economy does not survive. And I don't mean to suggest that Cullinan or I or you or anybody is going to be the savior of this economy. But more so now than ever before, one has to look at, if you're a taxing body, the long-range impact of development and what it does for the betterment of the community as a whole. So why do I think that this project betters the entire region of the greater metropolitan Joliet area? Well, the one real simple answer to that is the interchange. There is to be a new let me strike that. It is anticipated that there's going to be a new interchange at that location. This is an interchange that Joliet should have had many, many years ago. A full interchange at I-55 and 59 with connectivity is of a benefit to the entire community, and it's of a benefit to the entire, all the taxing districts. Cullinan and the city have worked very hard with IDOT to help bring about that interchange, but nothing is certain in today's environment. And part of what IDOT is looking for here is confirmation that the public supports the interchange. And that support takes place in a couple of different ways. One is just that the public is in support of the interchange, and so are the taxing bodies. But the other important aspect is that how is it going to be paid for? The city of Joliet is going to be asked, and has been asked by IDOT, to indicate that they will cover the, quote, local share cost of the interchange, and that's $12 million, plus land acquisition and other items. So it is a significant aspect for the city of Joliet to say that they are going to be covering $12 million here for the interchange. The cost, though, is much greater than just that, because having an interchange that just stops and does nothing benefits no one. So you have to have the connectivity, you have to have the interroad systems, and then it becomes a question of how one pays for all of that. Well, the means by which all of that is paid for, the city's local share, the roads and everything else, the other infrastructure, is the TIF district. In essence, without Rock Run Crossing, there is no revenues to pay the local share for the new interchange at I-55 and 59. And without the interchange, there's no Rock Run Crossing. And to be honest, without the TIF, there is no Rock Run Crossings in the manner in which it's going to be envisioned, and that will allow for tax revenues, TIF revenues, to pay for the very necessary infrastructure improvements. But I also want to leave you with another thought. It's not just the interchange, okay? That is, to me, is probably the most important aspect for the community as a whole, because there you're getting something that really you should have had all along, and it's finally within grasp of all the taxing bodies, able to be reached. But you're also going to be obtaining a new first-class development that'll be the front door to the community. It will have substantial revenues, and those revenues will outlast the TIF district term. And finally, and equally as important, that there's going to be spin-off development. Now, what do I mean by spin-off development? In our experience, and in Cullinan's experience, and we can point you to multiple instances where developments have taken place, development comes around and surrounds that development. Development, in effect, breeds development. People want to be where other things are being developed. And so we have had multiple instances of significant tax increases, significant EAV increases to the various taxing bodies, resulting from developments that have taken place because of a TIF development, but outside the TIF development. So what I'd like to do now is just go back just briefly to, I've answered why now, but if you'll take a look at slide 3, you're going to see what the interchange is to look like. That's a slide from the TIF redevelopment plan, and you can see the existing frontage road is all the infrastructure that basically serves that entire area. The road right-of-way, that which is shown in blue, is the new interchange that's supposed to be developed, as well as the additional roadway network that's going to be in existence. Once that is in place, the existing frontage road, which is the township road, will serve no purpose because connectivity to the property to the south will be achieved through the internal roadway network, thus saving some thus saving some funds for the township, because again, that road could probably be abandoned at that point in time. It doesn't serve any realistic purpose. The other aspect here is that we want to talk, I want to go next to the slide 4. And before I have Scott Brunton of our office start walking you through the legal requirements, one of the other aspects that you should all be asking yourself is, how can Cullinan pull this off during these economic times? I would like to believe that no one on the call would disagree with me that the interchange is of great significance to the entire region. I'm hoping you will find, upon our presentation, that the benefit of Rock Run Crossing is the TIF that allows that interchange to come into existence. So then your next question is, how is it in these uncertain times is Cullinan going to be able to pull off this development? Well, that slide 4 shows 3 developments. There's before, after, and then the graphic of the aerial of what it looks like today. Grand Prairie developments in Peoria, Streets of St. Charles in St. Charles, Missouri, and the Levy District in East Peoria. All of those projects were developed during most difficult economic financial times. Grand Prairie is a mixed-use lifestyle development, has an outdoor mall, traditional retail, hotels, grocery stores, apartments, and the core of it, the mall, was developed during the economic downturn of the late 1990s and early 2000s. Streets of St. Charles in St. Charles, Missouri is a high-density, mixed-use, new urbanist development. It includes first-class office space, a theater, many fine dining restaurants, retail, 2 hotels, and high-end urban luxury apartments. This was developed during the financial crisis in the years surrounding 2015. And the Levy District is the new downtown for East Peoria, Illinois, transforming a former industrial area into new retail, hotel, a signature bank building, new library, and city hall and community space. And this property was developed during the last recession. In all of these instances, and in many other Cullinan developments, the economic benefits were achieved during the most difficult of financial times and were achieved as a result of a close partnership with the cities and other taxing bodies within the affected areas, because everyone recognized the need of having something done and the use and function of TIF in order to bring about the objective, which was the redevelopment of the area. If you turn to slide 5, you'll see that's what Rock Run Crossing looks like today. Prior to that, it was vacant, scrub ground mostly. Now if you turn to number 6, or slide 6, here is what a picture of Rock Run Crossing can be. But to get there, we need the tax increment financing. Regal Theater has signed a lease for a 70,000 square foot state-of-the-art theater. Without the intersection, there will be no theater. So, as you listen to the reasons why this development and why a development of this magnitude is necessary to support the interchange and the network costs, and why the development will not take place unless there's a TIF, remember that without Rock Run Crossing, there's going to be no revenue to pay for the local share of the new interchange or for the amount of infrastructure that's going to be necessary, not just for this development, but for the connectivity to the rest of the community. And without the TIF, there's no Rock Run Crossing. So with that, Scott, would you please walk us through some of the legal requirements and why this property meets the legal requirements for a tax increment finance district?
Sure would, Rick. This is Scott Brunson. First, I need to make sure everybody can hear me. Are you guys able to hear me?
Loud?
Yes. Yep.
Okay, great. Yeah, I'll start walking us through, the legal requirements here. I know it's some of this you may have heard of or you know about already, but it's good just to give us some context here and some background as we move forward in this project. So first off, on slide 7, we talk about what is a TIF. Well, TIF is primarily an economic tool that's used by many municipalities to achieve a level of community and economic development for property that is underdeveloped or underperforming, underutilized or decaying or deteriorated or obsolete in some manner. And so this tool, the TIF tool, allows the municipality to promote controlled and beneficial development of the property beyond what current marketabilities or expectations would allow. So that's the first item. The second is TIFs, as you probably likely know, are the most important and yet the most common local economic development tool that Illinois municipalities use. Because of the benefits and the toolkit that the TIF district provides the municipality. That's primarily why we see them used in a lot of places to spur development. And just to be clear, what we're talking about, the tax increment that is used is the difference between the property tax revenue generated before and after the TIF district designation and then the development. So that tax increment is what provides the revenues for supporting the development. So turning to slide 8, just real quick, you'll see the 5 current TIF districts that the city of Joliet has. And likely some of you folks are quite familiar with them and have been involved in those. So moving on to slide number 9, here I just want to talk about the advantages of a TIF district. A TIF district allows the city to promote economic development in areas where it's most needed by creating new revenue source, like I just spoke about a few seconds ago. For development in that specific project area that is, and the revenue generated by that project area are separate and independent from the city's other revenue sources, and thus doesn't require an increase of taxes or any other revenues to support the TIF district itself. That's the primary advantage of the TIF district model. And it also, these TIF district revenues are then used to, as we've talked about, fund public infrastructure improvement, which then in turn are necessary to allow and spur the economic development of that project area. The second advantage to a TIF district is it allows the city to promote private investment, and this is most commonly done through development agreements, redevelopment agreements that are entered into by the city with private developers. And these agreements, the TIF tool gives the city quite a bit of latitude and ability to negotiate those agreements, and to both the benefit of the city and the developer, to help that promote that economic development. Other advantages include the TIF district model allows the city to assist with costs related to site assembly and marketing for the project area. And then lastly, there's just a lot of additional authority that's given to the city that allows them to promote development, which includes, like the site preparation costs, the financing, which is critical, gives them that authority. And there's other things that come into play when applicable, such as training for displaced workers or assistance with displaced residents. Those types of things are additional tools that you make in the toolkit. So moving on to slide number 10, these are the main legal requirements for creating a TIF. So first off, you need to define the project area for the proposed development, redevelopment. Second, we need to determine whether the land is improved or it's vacant, as defined under the TIF statute. Now, improved land, as you might expect, is land that would be improved with some type of industrial, commercial, or residential structures, or is improved in some other manner. It could be a parking lot, it could be, any other types of improvements as well. And the other type, of course, is vacant land, and that, as it suggests, is land that doesn't have those types of structures, but it also has to meet other definitions, other requirements under the TIF statute, which we'll talk about here shortly. After determining that part, whether it's improved or vacant land, then we next have to determine whether the land qualifies as a blighted or a conservation area. Now, the property's qualification as being improved or vacant then determines which sets of requirements we need to find under TIF statute, whether it's going to be blighted or conservation. And in order for the project to proceed, it must meet those qualifications, or else the project area is not eligible to be considered any further for the TIF statute for creating a TIF district. So that becomes kind of some critical legal linchpins in this process is those determinations. After making those determinations, then the city has to adopt a redevelopment plan and project for the proposed project area. It also has to designate that project area as what's defined as a redevelopment project area under the TIF statute. And last, it has to then adopt the tax increment financing, which is so critical to, the revenue is so critical to financing the public improvements for that project area. So those are the basic legal requirements. So let's move on to slide number 11 here. And these are basically we're looking at the procedural aspects for creating a TIF. So the very first thing to start the process of creating a TIF district is the city needs to prepare an eligibility study or have an eligibility study and project plan report prepared for them. And this has been done. This TIF report for the proposed Rock Run Crossing TIF district and development area has been on file with the city since February 21st. So that's been prepared and of course has been distributed to all of you folks. The next step is then setting the actual public hearing. The city has set the public hearing for June 2nd. They passed an ordinance on March 3rd setting that public hearing, and in that same ordinance also convened the Joint Review Board meeting that we're at now, which is the next step. Number 3 is convening a Joint Review Board for their recommendation, for their review of the project and recommendation to the city regarding the proposed project area and the report that's been presented to the Joint Review Board. So after the Joint Review Board's review of the situation, then prior to the actual public hearing, there's certain notices that have to be provided, and there's a notice that will be published in the newspaper, sent to the taxing districts, which you guys have already received. Property owners within the proposed TIF district, in this case, that's just Cullinan Properties, the developer. Also, any residential addresses within the TIF district and any residential addresses within 750 feet of the TIF district, they also receive notice. And as just in case you didn't know, this area right now does not have any current residential structure on the property, and we'll be talking about that shortly as well. So that notice then goes out, and then next, the city would then hold a public hearing, which has been, as I indicated, scheduled for June 2nd, and thereafter, no sooner than 14 days, but by 60 days thereafter, the city then has to adopt the ordinances that actually implement the TIF district, which includes approving the plan and project for the proposed TIF district, and that plan and project are set forth in the TIF report, which has been sent to you all. The city then also adopts an ordinance actually officially designating the redevelopment project area, and then last adopting that TIF increment financing ordinance. So that's the general procedural aspects, which you can see we're in the middle of that now. So we'll turn to the next slide. This is slide number 12. This shows the boundary map for the proposed project area. This is also set forth in your TIF report as Exhibit B. And as we've been talking about, this is situated in that northeast quadrant of the I-80, I-55 intersection. So next, the next slide, slide number 12, this shows the taxing districts for each of the lots that now comprise the proposed project area. I know it's kind of, you probably can't read that real well, the legend there, but the easiest part or the quickest way to talk about this is the lot 1, which is the northernmost lot, and is in green, and the other 4 lots are designated in different colors. The only difference between basically the only difference between those two areas is the high school district. So the Joliet Township High School District covers Lot 1, while the Manuka High School District covers those other 4 lots. Outside of those two districts that are somewhat split across this project area, all the other taxing bodies involved in this meeting here today, the property is within, all those parcels are within your taxing districts. So next, we get into kind of the legal nitty-gritty of this whole thing, which is on slide 14. All right, so here first, does the property qualify as vacant land or improved land under the TIF statute? Well, it qualifies as vacant land. There are no structures on it, so the improved land part of the TIF statute does not come into play for us. We're just looking at vacant land. All that land is currently vacant. And under the TIF statute, besides being vacant, the property also has the other requirement is that it's not been used for commercial agriculture for the last 5 years. Well, the property has been, that's pretty clear. The majority of that property is still being farmed. But under the TIF statute, it creates a very specific exception that allows us to sidestep that whole commercial agricultural use issue. And the legislature has come up with this exception that if the property at one point in time was a larger tract and now has been subdivided into 3 or smaller parcels between 1950 and 1990, then this property qualifies as vacant land. And in fact, this property has been subdivided over the years, and during this time period, especially in the 80s, that qualify it under this specific provision that allows this property to be categorized as vacant land under the TIF statute. So that first important aspect has been met. This land does qualify as vacant land. So second, we get into, well, is the land blighted as defined under this TIF statute, or is it a conservation area? Well, because it's vacant land, the conservation area aspect also falls out of the picture. So we're just looking at, we need to focus our attention just on then, is it blighted? And there are several factors, but we just are going to talk about the 2 that it meets. And it has to meet 2 factors out of a list of 6 in this particular part of the statute. And the 2 factors that it does meet, which qualifies this area, this land, as also being a blighted area, are obsolete platting and lack of growth in EAV. So just to talk about obsolete platting quickly, this is platting that's failed to create any rights of way for streets or alleys, or has created inadequate rights of way for streets and alleys, and as well, it has omitted or has insufficient easements for public utilities. And these are any kind of utilities that would be necessary to help the development of the land or maintain the land, which would include water and sewer, electrical, those types of utilities, fiber optic cable, telecommunications, and so forth.
Excuse me, this is Mayor Odekirk. I'm on the line.
Oh, we'll let you jump in.
Thank you. Yeah, I apologize for interrupting, but I'm running today. I just wanted to thank Colin and express the degree of support that you guys have from the city of Joliet. We're 100% behind this project. We do think it's the best use of land. The council's waited a long time for a project like this. We had significant logistic trucking companies come in, and we've turned them down over the years. So I think, I'm speaking for the city, I think we're all in on Colin, and I just want to express my support. And if anyone had any questions, otherwise I'll punch back out.
Thank you, Mayor.
Okay. Yeah, thank you,
Okay,
Mayor.
good, thank you. All right, have a good day, thank you.
Scott, if you could continue, thank you.
All right, thanks. Yeah, well, it's good to break up the this part of the presentation because I know it can be kind of dry for sure. Anyway, I talked about obsolete plating, what that would be. That's when there's a lack of roadways or right-of-ways or easements that would be necessary to support development of the area, project area. And second is the lack of growth in EAV. Now, the second factor is met when the total EAV for the project area has increased at an annual rate that is less than the rest of the city over the last three of the last 5 years. Another way to also qualify for lack of growth of EAV is that the project area, the EAV for the project area has increased an annual rate that is less than the CPI, the Consumer Price Index, for urban areas that apply to the city of Joliet for 3 of the last 5 years. Now turning to slide 15, you'll see a map of the project area again, which shows it being vacant, and it also generally shows that there are no roadways, as I've talked about, the obsolete platting. So there's the one frontage road to the west, and then a short roadway that comes in from the northeast. The majority of the land does not have any sufficient right-of-way or easements that currently exist that would support the necessary utilities to develop this area. So this map shows that obsolete platting in kind of a generic way. And then the next slide, we're looking at the lack of growth of EAV. And this chart, just so you know, is also in the TIF report as Exhibit D. But in this, I've broken it out to compare here the lack of EAV growth for the project area versus the city of Joliet. And the way the statute is written, you look at all the other properties, you take the project area from the city of Joliet EAV, and so that's been subtracted when you look at the city's numbers on slide 16. But as you can see, over the last 4 years, we have data for the last 4 of 5 tax years. The EAV for the project area is less, and obviously significant less for the last couple of years due to some significant reductions in the EAV of the project area. So moving forward then to slide 17, we do the same comparison, then we compare it with the CPI during that same period of time. But the results are a little bit different, but you see the 3 of the 5 years, in 2014, 2017, 2018, the increase in the EAV is less than the CPI. So based on that, both of those, you only need one of those to qualify under the TIF Act, but this demonstrates that in fact it actually meets two of the methods for showing lack of growth. So the obsolete platting and the lack of growth have been shown for this area, which qualifies it as a blighted area. I also just want to quickly mention, as indicated in the TIF report, and also back on slide 14, there's an additional blighting factor that separately qualifies this vacant land, which is the flooding factor. And the TIF report provides a review and analysis by B3, the engineering company that's assisting with this project regarding the flooding in this area. It does the water, the stormwater drains and drains and causes some flooding downstream and contributes to that flooding eventually in the Des Plaines River watershed that this is a part of, the Rock Run Creek is a part of, and so that also qualifies it as a blighted area. But Anyway, I just wanted to point that out because I mentioned it on slide 14. But primarily the focus of our discussion and our analysis has been on the obsolete platting and the lack of growth in the AV. So I want to now quickly discuss some other important elements that also need to be met from a legal perspective in order to qualify for the project area to qualify for TIF designation, which is shown on slide 18. So first thing, these are pretty straightforward, but the project area has to, all the land has to be contiguous, adjacent to each other, and it is. It's 5 contiguous parcels. It has to be over 1.5 acres in total size, and it meets that requirement because it has 263 acres in size. The next other thing to point out is there's no residential structures, which I discussed previously, but it is significant because if there's residential structures within the project area, then there's several other procedural aspects that have to be undertaken. But because there are no residential structures currently in the project area, those we don't have to be concerned with those other elements or other procedures. These last two are actually pretty critical as well as in order to qualify this area for a TIF district designation. But under the TIF statute, we need to look at the comprehensive plan that the city would have for a particular area. And this area at this point is outside and it does not have a comprehensive plan that covers it. So then we need to look at other ways the city has looked at this property and tried to plan for its development. And that has been done through zoning. So the city previously has zoned this area as B2, as a B2 central business district. And all the proposed uses that we'll be talking about or have briefly discussed for the project area are permitted in the B2 in some fashion. So whether outright or as a special use. So everything that's presented in the project and plan for this project area falls under that zoning that is at this point the only strategic planning we have for this particular area of the city. So this project area actually supports and is in line and aligns with the city's development strategy for this area of the city. And last but not least, because this is pretty important, and whenever you get to hear TIF experts talk about TIF districts, this last requirement, meeting the but-for TIF requirement under the TIF statute, is critical. Essentially what we need to determine is that without the TIF district, development will occur. Well, without it, I'm sorry, I'm saying that right. So we need to have the TIF district where development will just not occur. And clearly, as many of you likely know, there's been at least one project, probably several over the many years that the city's looked to develop this area. But most recently, before Cullen got involved, there was a developer that had tried for several years working with the city to develop this area. A TIF district was never designated. That project just was unable to move forward without that necessary infrastructure and the financing that the district provides for it. So we clearly have an example, and it makes an easier calculus here to say that without this TIF district, this area will not develop in a way that the city would find beneficial to the community and in a controlled manner that benefits all the taxing districts in the community. So I think as we find in the TIF report that you've seen that this project area or this TIF project itself does meet this but-for test, and is primarily a big reason why we're talking today, why we'd like to put a TIF district in this area to see that and to spur that economic development for the city. The next slide, we look at the key elements of the actual plan and project. So slide 19. This, when you look at the TIF report, it's kind of broken into two basic parts. One is what I just talked about, all the legal requirements and meeting those legal requirements to become a TIF district. And next is, the second part is the actual TIF plan and project. That is the actual overarching plan to develop this area. And just to point out the key aspects of that plan and project in the report, the proposed land uses that for the project area is a mixed use, initially which would be primarily commercial and business, but there's also some planning down the road that would include some residential and some other types of development, but primarily looking at commercial business to get things started. The second key element of the plan and project are those public infrastructure improvements. It might feel like we're being quite repetitive, but that's the key component of a TIF district, is being able to provide the revenues to support those improvements. So obviously that's important. The road improvements that tie into the improved I-55 exchange project is a critical component of this project. Another key element, or just to give you some overviews from the cost perspective, is at this point in time, the estimated project costs are in the neighborhood of $161 million, which would increase the AV now from, as you saw in those charts, from just a little, over 200,000 in EAV, total EAV, to 80 million in EAV, which is obviously a pretty significant increase and would generate significant revenues for those public infrastructure improvements that are so important. So at this point, I'm going to turn it back over to Rick Joseph. He's going to talk about the rest of this, or I'll certainly be available for questions when we get to the question point, but I was going to turn it over to Rick to go through the remaining part of the presentation.
Thank you very much, Scott. I appreciate that. Ladies and gentlemen, we're now on slide 20 and 21, which is the anticipated Rock Run Crossing TIF project and the proposed timeline. I'm not going to go through those in any detail. I mean, you've heard from us what we anticipate in terms of a very quality, high-end development, something that you're going to be very proud of. And again, we'll speak to that a little bit more, and there will be more information provided in that regard. And the slide 21 is simply the proposed timeline. It just tells you, what track this is on. But what I want to focus on is this slide 22, which is basically the summary of the Rock Run Crossing TIF as we look to conclude our remarks. I mean, the purpose of a TIF, obviously, is to promote beneficial growth within the area. And that's beneficial growth for the entire region, not just for the city, not just for the project itself. In my opinion, you do not get the interchange, you do not have the capacity to pay for the interchange without revenues and the revenues that are going to be generated by this development. It also brings about a significant amount of spin-off development that's going to help each of your taxing districts. And this development is also going to assist all of the taxpayers in the region. I mean, there's going to be very significant, both temporary and permanent jobs. Much construction in terms of it, not just in terms of the roadway and the infrastructure and the interchange, but all of the buildings and everything that's going to take place on that site is going to infuse lots of money and provide great benefit for all of the citizens of all of the taxing bodies. Right now, the property is underutilized. As Scott alluded to, there have been others that have attempted to develop this property. It's a tough piece of property to develop without the interchange, without access. It's going to likely remain in its current present position. Each of the taxing bodies will continue to receive, as a result of the TIF, the tax revenues that they're receiving now from the site. What we're asking you for is the increment in order to bring about the interchange, which brings about the development and helps pay for it, and then also provides all the other benefits. So again, without the TIF, there's no increment, but then again, without the TIF, there's also going to be no aspect in terms of this property being better developed and developed in the future in a way that's going to assist the community as a whole. The development through the TIF provides financing for critical public benefits. We've hit hard upon that. We've talked to you a lot about that. But I want to speak now just to something that I know is more important to each of the taxing bodies, and that is the aspect of the revenues. You all recognize that you're not giving up anything because you're going to receive the revenues that the property already generates. So it's a question of whether or not giving up the increment results in a benefit to you. Well, I would suggest that yes, it does, that the life of the TIF, that the development and the increase in EAV is going to long outweigh the TIF. But more important, the way we anticipate that these infrastructures improvements are going to be funded are through the issuance of bonds by the city of Joliet. And those bonds will be alternate revenue bonds. The city will have its full faith and credit on the line to help bring about an attractive interest rate. Now, most of you probably are aware that when you issue alternate revenue bonds, you have to have debt service coverage of at least 1.25. So there has to be a demonstration of sufficient revenues plus a 25% cushion for purposes of having those bonds become marketable at a realistic price. We are asking for 100% of the TIF because we need that to be pledged for the bonds. We have to have that to demonstrate that we have an excess of a 125 debt service coverage, which again brings down the overall cost of the borrowing for the bonds, brings in the infrastructure at a more economical rate. Because of that, we do not anticipate that, let me state this another way. We anticipate that there will be revenues to be distributed to the taxing bodies within the 23-year period of the TIF. Now, I'm not here to tell you that you're going to start getting revenues year one, because that's not likely to be the case, because there's not going to be a lot of increments being generated. But the models that Cullinan has that have been provided to the city that are looking to be verified by the city's TIF consultants, and for which there's consultant reports being prepared, they will demonstrate the likelihood of revenues to be generated in excess of what's necessary for the bonds. Most likely you're going to have other questions on that, and we're going to be happy to share information with you in that regard as it becomes available in the future. But again, you're not giving up everything here, but we are asking for the increment because it's necessary for purposes of supporting the bonds. Then the last item, significantly improved highway and roadway access. Again, I don't know how anybody can dispute that aspect. And then finally, I want to hit upon the last bullet point, which is no meaningful adverse impacts on the taxing districts. I just told you why you're not, you're going to continue to receive the tax revenues that you've been receiving. We anticipate that there may be revenues available for distribution over and above what is necessary to support the bonds in future years. But you also then are going to ask yourself the question, are we getting hurt here? Well, the school districts are the ones who typically ask that question because of the amount of students. And when you look at this plan, there is residential plan for a portion of this site. Now, Manuka is not the taxing body for Lot 1, so there's going to be no residential on Manuka's site. And the future development area is not really conducive to a residential development. Cullinan's feasibility study shows a maximum residential density for the site of about 520 units. Phase 1 has 260 units planned. But let me explain that these units are going to be not designed for families. The units are a mix of studio, 1-bedroom, and 2-bedroom. They're high-end. They're going to appeal to millennials and to retirees. They include fitness components. They have dog washing stations. They don't have playgrounds. And if you want to look for examples of what we've done or Cullinan's done in that regard, all you have to do is look to the St. Charles project. It's very similar in terms of the market that they're trying to reach. Dog washing stations, not playgrounds. There are no children within those units. The report that Cullinan had prepared in connection with the density for the residential units indicates that at most it's likely that there's going to be 9 school-age children in those 260 units. They project 3 in K through 8 and maybe 6 in high school. So again, there's not going to be a significant impact upon the taxing bodies as a result of increased amount of students or use, in terms of the libraries and so on. Again, all what this does, though, is it does help provide for substantial spin-off in terms of developments that, again, will generate additional revenues for your taxing bodies. So, before we open it up to questions, I just want to say thank you for your time today. Thank you for your consideration of this very worthwhile project. We trust that you found, based upon the information presented here today, that the Rock Run Crossing project meets the legal requirements for tax increment financing, that a project of this magnitude is one that the community will be proud of, but that it will not occur in the absence of a TIF, especially given the substantial infrastructure needed, that the TIF makes possible the funding and fruition of the new interchange that benefits the entire region and all of the citizens of the various taxing districts, and that there is no adverse material impact upon the taxing bodies. So again, what we believe is without Rock Run Crossing, there's no revenue to pay for the local share of the new interchange or for the infrastructure improvements. Without the interchange, there's no Rock Run Crossings. And without the TIF, there's no Rock Run Crossings. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that we can before we turn to the next the next agenda item.
Hi, Richard. This is Tim Brophy with Will County. How are you?
Good, Tim. Thank you.
Very quick, a couple questions. First of all, 100% TIF for how many years? Did I miss that?
Well, 23 years is what. Yes, the life of a TIF district in Illinois is going to be 23 years.
Got it. Thank you. And then I couldn't tell by the road layout diagram. Is there a residence there at the south end of this property, outside of the project area?
There is no residence at the south end of the project. I believe that there is a parcel of property at the south end of this that is not owned by Cullinan, right. But it is not, to my knowledge, residential in any stretch.
All right, and have you is there access for that? It looks like a small farm, or I don't know what it is, but is there access for them with the new road configuration?
Absolutely. If you would turn to slide, let me get my slides here in order. If you turn back to slide 4, I believe. I'm sorry, slide 3. If you turn back to slide 3, the roadway network, that blue design, that bumps up against and will provide access to the property to the south.
All right.
You follow me?
Yeah, it looked like the current frontage road goes a little bit beyond where your road will go, and I didn't know if your road would reach that property or not.
Our road does reach the property, yes.
All right, and they'll have access.
Yes, we cannot landlock them. We will not landlock them.
Good. And then lastly, in your review of the values there, the EAV, I don't know if the Act allows. I assume you do, but the 3 years of increase followed by 2 years of decrease. What happened the question I would have if I were is, when did Cullinan own the property? And was there an event that occurred there in 2016-17? Did you secure a reduction in the assessment? Or
Cullinan did not. Cullinan has not taken any action to seek a reduction in the assessed value of that
So
property.
that was the township assessor that made that change?
Yes.
2017?
Yes.
Okay, and is 2 years of negative growth sufficient according to the Act?
Well, yes, it is, because again, it's not so much, the negative underscores how bad it's been, but the actual question is, how does it compare to the change in CPI for the rest of the area? And it is below.
Yeah, I was looking at the earlier years, the 3 years, it exceeded 2 out of the 3, and then turned around to the decrease. As long as it meets what's in the Act is all I wanted.
It does.
Thank you.
It does. Thank you.
Okay, Tim, thank you for your questions. Rick and Scott, thank you for the general project overview, discussion of the TIF eligibility factors, and the general process. We will continue these questions and answers under the next section in our agenda, and that is discussion of the project as well as the proposed TIF district. To better manage this section, I will go through the list. And if you don't have a question or comment, when I come to your name, we'll pass on to the next person on the list. And then if you are thinking of a question as we go through the list, I will come back through a second time so that we make sure that we get everyone's questions and comments. So we'll start with Matt Peel. Matt, do you have any questions, any comments at this point? Okay, we'll move on to Jeff Heap.
Just one clarifying question on the TIF district. It looks like all of it's public improvements. This TIF doesn't have anything being rebated back to the developer built into it?
That is correct. Obviously, the details of that are going to be set forth within a redevelopment plan approved by the city, but this is geared towards a TIF necessary for the infrastructure improvements. That's not just roads, it would be water, sewer, electricity, everything it takes to do the development and make it a success. But it does not anticipate what some TIFs have in terms of a rebate back to the developer.
Okay.
Okay, Lisa Lebovitz.
Yeah, this is Lisa Banovitz from the Joliet Park District. I don't know if this is going to be popular or unpopular, but the district does not want to see any new TIF districts created. We receive so little from tax money right now to think that even a little bit's going to be taken away from us. It's heartbreaking. And I'm looking at what the district is intending to do, and I see big theaters and I see big open spaces where there's dining areas. With social distancing, we don't even know if theaters are going to be allowed. And I understand this conversation is probably premature, but our facilities that we rely on to bring revenue into our district are closed. We don't have any money coming in right now. So it would be the district's position to vote against it. And I don't know as far as when the approval process comes, do you need 100% approval from all the taxing bodies? I don't know how that works, but they're talking about park and community centers. Well, that's what we do. That we have parks and we have community centers, and unfortunately, our community centers are all closed right now. And
Lisa,
to think, and 23 years, such a long time, and that could even be extended beyond the 23 years.
Lisa, thank you for your comments. Let me address a couple of those. First of all, my first public law client, the one I'm most proud of, is the Fond du Lac Park District. And it's been my client. It's been the only client I've kept for my entire 37 years of being in practice, other than my father. And so I understand very much the concerns of the Park District, and our facilities, like yours, are also shut down. One, you're not giving up what you're receiving presently. You're giving up the increment.
Right,
And
that's correct.
while I can appreciate that there's a need for revenues, without the increment, the project doesn't go forward.
Well, that's
And-
this project, though.
That's what?
That's this particular project.
That
So
is-
there's- Right.
I will agree with you that it's this particular project, but again, this property will remain, in my opinion, wholly undeveloped or extremely underutilized with no significant tax benefit and certainly no spin-off development without the interchange. And so, again, that's what makes this project possible, but it's also what makes the interchange possible. And so you're right. I mean, if there's no interchange and Cullinan doesn't do this, will this property sit vacant forever? Chances are no, but past history has been such that it hasn't been developed. And I would venture to say when you look at the connectivity, or should I say the lack of connectivity to this site, it's not going to develop in a fashion that will provide significant benefit to the taxing bodies or to the community. And to answer your other question, it does not need 100%.
Right, so I just want to go on record saying that we're objecting to it, so that's my position at this point in time.
Thank you.
Joseph Balt.
Did you call Joe?
Yes.
Well, yes, I think it was a very thorough presentation, and I personally am in favor of it.
Thank you. Megan Millen.
Hello, yes, I don't have any questions, and we can appreciate the larger, bigger picture here in the economic development gains we had here. Very good presentation, thank you.
Thank you. Landis Hampton.
Yes, I have a question. I know the one parcel that you mentioned is for JT 204 is majority residential. What if the projections come back wrong in regards to the number of students that comes out of that parcel? Is there a provision of potentially some type of impact fees regarding students coming out of that area?
There has not been discussion, Alandis, about an impact fee in that regard, but we're happy to have some further discussions with you to help demonstrate to you why we don't believe that the study is going to be wrong. I mean, again, a lot depends upon, and Cullinan can promise, as to what type of development is going to be there. But, you know, with the majority being, you know, 1 bedroom and studio and some 2 bedroom, you're not going to have a lot of students in those facilities there. It's just not what it's geared towards.
Do you know how many 2-bedroom is projected?
Off the top of my head, I do not. Maybe if someone on the Cullinan team knows that off the top of their head. If not, Alandis, I will get you that information, because we do have what the plan shows for the number of 2-bedroom.
Okay. That's all the questions I have.
Okay. The city's typical development impact fees would apply to any construction on this site, including our school fees, and those are typically calculated on a bedroom basis. So we would have that provision in place.
Okay, that's good to know. Thanks.
Thank you. Dr. Cole?
He had to leave the meeting, but at this time we do not have any questions from Troy School District.
Thank you. Dr. Lee?
Yes, this is John Troy for Minooka. I've got 3 questions. One, what's the timeline for approval of the exchange? 2, what happens, if anything, if the exchange to the TIF, if the exchange does not come to fruition? And 3, can you give me an estimate of what the total of the alternate revenue bonds would be issued for this type of project?
John, you've asked some very, very good questions. So the timeline, because I really meant to speak to that, so thank you for giving me this opportunity. We are working closely with IDOT in terms of the timeline. The hope and expectation right now is that there will be construction contracts let in the third or fourth quarter of this year. So that will give you an idea of what the start time is. Now, here's where things get difficult. And I don't want to just prey upon the coronavirus or the COVID-19 pandemic, but all of those things have brought some uncertainty. And IDOT is looking for demonstration from the developer and, more important, from the community that this project is going to go forward, because IDOT doesn't want to have an interchange that just goes nowhere. They want assurance that the city is going to be able to pay for the infrastructure improvements, the local share, and for the connectivity. So part of what we're asking you for here is a recommendation, not just for the benefit of the TIF, but also for purposes of the city and for Cullinan to go to IDOT and say, here we have the Joint Review Board, the meeting of the local taxing bodies who can understand this and who are in agreement that the TIF is necessary to provide the funds which allows the city to proceed with the infrastructure and pay the local share for the local roads and for the interchange. Put another way, we're also hoping that when you find that this project is worthwhile, you do so, and we can use that with IDOT to help leverage this and impress upon them the importance of moving quickly. Now, I'm not telling you that IDOT has said they're putting the brakes on it. Please don't take that. But everybody is always concerned right now, and any aspect, because IDOT has asked us for demonstrations from the public as to their support of this. And your recommendation from the Joint Review Board is a very important part of that. It will help the timeline in terms of the interchange taking place. So now let me address your second question, which is what happens to the interchange if there. I think your question was what happens to the TIF if there is no interchange.
Yes.
If there is no interchange, then Cullinan is not going to be able to develop this property in the fashion in which it is intended to be developed. We have multiple retailers, multiple office users, people who are looking at this project. We're looking at it before COVID-19, are looking at it presently. They want to see that first spade of dirt turned for the interchange. So if there's no interchange, I would venture to say there's not going to be significant development on the site. And under those circumstances, I would venture to say the city, even though there may be a TIF district there, the city's not going to be willing to issue alternate revenue bonds or provide any incentives. So, in effect, you've got a TIF, but it probably doesn't do anything. Did I answer your questions, John?
Yes, yes.
Okay, thank you.
The last item, an estimate on the total amount of alternate revenues to be issued?
Again, I should probably know that off the top of my head. I do not. It is somewhat fluid because a lot depends upon the infrastructure network and the cost of right-of-way acquisition. But I will get you that number, unless someone on the Cullinan team has that number at their disposal. If not, I will. I've got your email, and I will get you that number.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Gregory.
I'm good. I support the project. It will be a great project once it all is completed.
Thank you. Mr. Brophy.
As you know, I supported this when I was on the Joliet City Council, and I'm very happy that it's finally coming to reality, so I support.
Thank you. Our public member, Mr. Tonelli.
Thanks, Kendall. I have no other questions. Just would like to thank the presenters for the great thorough presentation and thank the taxing bodies who've spoken for their very good questions as well. I guess just to make one comment, as the property has sat there, as was outlined in the presentation now, with, development interest for going on, some 15 plus years and nothing's happened, I certainly support the notion that without the interchange, there's nothing going to occur there. And without us as a community applying some appropriate economic development tools to assist, that interchange isn't going to happen. So it's an important hearing that we're going through today and an important consideration for all the taxing districts.
Thank you. I'll go back up to the top to see if there are any comments or questions for Mr. Peel. Okay, hearing none, we'll go on to the next section of the meeting. And as Mr. Conley had mentioned at the top of the meeting, this next section doesn't necessarily require any action today. There have been, I think, a lot of good comments, but we understand that there may be the need to go back to your various districts and have further conversations about these proposals. Would there be any action that we could entertain today?
Kendall, it's Rod Tonelli speaking. Assuming that there is not an ability to take any action today as each of the districts has to return to their boards, is there a date to which this would be tabled or just another public hearing notice that would go out? How would that proceed?
Chair Jackson, would you like me to address that? This is Rick Joseph.
Oh, certainly, Rick.
Okay, certainly. Rod, the statute allows you to continue the hearing within a period of 30 days, if you'd like. Alternatively, if the parties are ready to vote today, there's a recommendation and an action item that's possible. So as I was hearing some of the comments, I think there's some that are in support, some that want to go back to their board, and certainly Cullinan wants to give you every opportunity to address this with your boards. But if that can be done today, that would be great. If not, the other way would be to send a written comment back to the city in support, or Park District, we understand, has already indicated that they're not in support. But if the parties are in support, to send a written communication back to the city. Again, the statute allows for 30 days, but I would please ask you, if this can be done quicker, that is better, because again, it gives us what we need to go back to IDOT to make sure that the interchange is not being delayed. Did I answer your question, or did I just confuse it more?
I think you've answered it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, with that being said, I think Mr. Conley could reach back out to the various districts.
Yeah, we do need to, I guess we do need to make some type of action if it is the desire of the JRB members to go back to their districts and communicate with their boards. Then we would need a motion to table. If there was an appetite to vote today, that could also be done as well. So we're looking for either a motion to approve or deny, or a motion to table.
Motion to table, Minoka.
Seconded, Tim Brophy.
All in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed?
For clarification then, since we didn't have a specific date in that motion to table? How do we determine?
I'm looking at our Assistant
Point
Corporation
everything you
Counsel, and she is saying that we do not have to pick a date right now. But as you get your recommendations, or as you talk to your boards, please send me a formal letter voicing either support or opposition to the project. And as Mr. Rick Joseph indicated, we are under a 30-day timeline, and the sooner the better, I guess. And so, hearing none opposed, I believe the motion to table passes.
Okay, thank you. Is there a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
Motion.
Lane Troy School District.
Okay, and who was the second?
Well, right, we have second.
Thank you. All signify by saying aye.
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 We are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.